I'm tired. I'm tired of all of these like hot gotcha anti-Catholic arguments. I won't name names of people who do this, but a lot of people do this, and like entire like their entire like edifice against Catholicism doesn't really go down to like the foundational issues between us. It kind of goes to like how many sort of like accidental issues can I grab a hold of, and then I'm sure you see this with Catholics against Protestants as well. It's like we should discuss, okay, what are the substantial, essential,
Yeah.
foundational differences that we have again like between one another, rather than like, okay, how can I find like a gotcha on like this
Yeah,
like
exactly.
really far out edge of our system of like actually like Pope Francis in an airplane interview like sneezed 3 times in a row, and that actually in Hispanic culture means that he's like worshiping Satan or something, and therefore it's like something like that, and I hear it. Or it's like actually like James Martin and Cardinal Fernandez are super cringe, and Pope Francis hasn't like RKO'd them into a like brick building yet, and hasn't like destroyed and like carpet bombed all
But
of the German bishops yet. Therefore, like Catholicism.
and rounded up all the German bishops in the camps. But Wagner, forgeries.
That's true. That's
More
true.
forgeries.
Like, okay, Paul, do you think if like do you think that Catholicism could be true and could coexist with like the fact that the German bishops are cringe and that the Pope hasn't done anything about them? Do you think that would like necessarily be a defeater?
No, not necessarily. For me, I don't say that itself is a defeater. For me, it's kind of but it is a very serious wait and see kind of thing where potentially a defeater could come out at the end of this, or it could resolve.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
issue I have
it's not in
is like,
itself, not.
okay, but like if for example the papacy wasn't in the ante-Nicene church, then that would be like instantly a
So real life,
defeater for
yeah.
yeah. So the problem is one of those is extremely rhetorically effective.
Mhm.
Like, oh, CDF answer on transgender baptism's bad or whatever like that.
Right.
Those things that aren't necessarily defeaters are very rhetorically powerful.
Yep.
But on the other hand, those things that are necessary defeaters are extremely difficult. Like kind of like Michael
Yeah.
Lofton's argument against Stephen Nimesh. Like actually, this is like really difficult to like research and stuff, and like it's really difficult, and you have to like argue over this stuff. So like those things are much less rhetorically powerful. So people aren't going to discuss the actual like essential issues, and that happens all the time.
And yeah, I misunderstood you on the first reading when you said I missed how you said and Francis' statement. So I thought you were saying for a second that you said Sean Luke was saying Catholicism false because they burn heretics, but I missed the second bit, so I corrected that. But yeah. That's a very true phenomenon. Because for me, for example, if I wanted to point to evidential defeaters, I'd point to an event like, say, the Meletian Schism.
Mhm.
But that's not something where I can just say papacy true. But hang on, Meletian Schism. Ordinary people will ask, "What's a Meletian?" And some people may even straight up ask, "What's a schism?" And then even further, even if people know what both of those are, they'll still ask, "What's the significance?" And you have to go through all this historical backstory and actually look at the principles of the papacy and see how, well, look, these don't fit.
Mhm.
So arguments which I consider powerful like that, they take some backstory. It's not exactly pithy.
Yeah, that and I feel like a lot of people are they have a very grave fear of seeming like they're coping, you know? Um so oftentimes that leads to like an all or nothing approach with evidence is
Mhm.
like when you go into the evidence for something and you're looking through and you're discussing it, like properly weighing not only the evidence for the thing itself, but also its connection with the doctrine that it either opposes or supports.
Yeah,
Like
right.
there's like no no realization of that all those moves that you have to do. First, you have to prove
Yeah.
that the event itself happened or that the doctrine is found or whatever, and that's obviously going to depend on how much evidence for and against it and such.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, not only do you have to get there, but you also have to get to proving that this necessarily contradicts this. And I feel
Yeah.
like both of those moves kind of don't get done. Like people just kind of throw out stuff, and like
Exactly.
it's like
Yeah.
throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what will
They.
stick. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
Ignatius says like Bishop good or Eucharist or whatever, and like schism's bad and throws it against a wall. And it's like, well,
Exactly. Yeah.
well,
They
it's not
take,
really proving what you think it is. No.
if someone's trying to use a positive proof text, they take the use of the same or similar words as ipso facto they mean the same thing as I do, therefore it's evidence. Or to the converse, when they see what on the very basic surface looks like a verbal contradiction between an idea and a proof text, then they'll point out, oh, look, see, this father contradicts that. But that's like, as you said, you're missing those two steps. You've got to actually, well, for one, authenticate the sources. But then second, you've got to actually analyze, well, what does the source actually mean by this word or this phrase, and etc. And people skip that step so often. And I've found countless times that the surface reading can be extremely misleading, especially, oh, God forbid, especially if you find it through a quote mine site. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this. I've experienced this a lot with like Essence Energies debate things. Also filioque as well. I mean, like the whole famous thing with the
Mm.
cause argument, which is
Mm.
like
No,
what
my favorite,
gets
my
thrown out all
favorite
the time.
is um, my favorite is Calvinism and Reformed theology. Calvinism and Reformed theology is the mono-energist heresy. That's my favorite. That's my absolute favorite one.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because they're monergists, and that's mono-energism. That I can't. Some actually say that. I can't believe it. It's so funny.
Yeah,
That's one of my
the
favorite examples.
I haven't listened to Jay talk about that much, but that's pretty stupid. Not gonna lie.
Verily, verily. Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, I don't really know where to. This is why I stick away from like Protestant apologetics and like I stick to like the very narrow areas that I know, which is going to be filioque is really the only area that'll stick. Like people always want me to do papacy stuff. People always want me to do this and that, but it's just there's so much that's there. There's so much that needs to be read. There's so many different authors that need to be gone over that it's like people like, and not to call them out or anything like this, but people like Trent Horn, Jimmy Aiken, Michael Lofton that like try to cover everything. Like any time that you get somebody who has deeply studied one of those things, like for example, if I were to go and look at Jimmy Aiken's articles on um, Calvinism, which I think that's something that Calvinism, like predestination, election, stuff like that, or Trent Horn stuff on that, or their stuff on, or like Michael Lofton stuff on the filioque, all their stuff on all of these areas. Like I can say, like, well, that argument's not necessarily good, and this one could be better
Yeah.
in this way, and
Yeah.
blah blah
Right.
blah blah. Or you didn't represent the position well, and I think that's important that in the like apologetic sphere, a lot of people need to know their limits,
Mm-hmm.
which is is
Yep.
is extremely important because everybody has the temptation, and like I'm sure you feel the same temptation, but
Mm.
everybody has the temptation to want to cover everything.
Yep.
So like if this is popular, like if like let's say, you know, I stick away from sufficient grace stuff because I've been doing a lot of research on it. And I think I'm finally getting to like a point where I might feel comfortable talking about it in a public manner. But everybody wants me to talk about sufficient grace stuff. They want to like, okay, can you talk about Father Most's position, blah blah blah, all these positions. But I don't want to because I think there's more stuff that I need to read before I feel comfortable giving a judgment. I think people recognize that and respect me for it. But yeah, there's always the temptation to just start talking about stuff that you haven't researched enough, which is you see it all the time in the apologetic sphere, and it just makes for a lot of low quality content, and also for a lot of people who are not only misinformed, but they're also extremely haughty about what they think they know.
Yep. Yeah, I have to 100% concur that the way I frame it is knowing to how to choose your battles. Because as you say, the temptation, that is such a real thing. You see someone making an argument against your tradition, and you see the temptation picks up when like you see that their argument's getting a lot of steam, and like a lot of people saying, wow, this is amazing. And worse, you see people in the comments who are like, I'm a Protestant, or I'm a Romanist, but this is really making me reconsider things.
I hate those comments.
Yeah. And yet you got to know, well, as tempting as it is to respond, as you say, you got to know, well, hang on, am I actually capable of responding to this adequately right now? It would in such a way that will do due diligence to the issue. Am I actually learned enough on it that I'm actually have that kind of intellectual right to respond to it? And that's ultimately what I do with my content. For example, if I'm making a video on something, I'm not going to do a video on something that I've like half-assed the research on. I can get in like casual debates and like low key settings, whatever, and maybe I'll talk about things which I'm not super well versed in, just cause. But in terms of actual public discourse and debate, yeah, 100%. I can attest to how strong the temptation is, and yet how frustratingly I have to pull myself back to say, Paul, pick your battles. You're not ready for this one yet. Just do the research first, and through that's where I've cultivated basically my love for my comfortability and honestly love for how, with respect to history, because like we're kind of like the yin and yang here. We're like you like your philosophy more, I like my history more. Although of course we both delve in both. Of course we have to, but just in terms of emphasis, I see myself more as the history guy. And through cultivating a virtue of humility and not speaking all the time and just being slow to speak until I do the research, that's cultivated in me an actual love for history, not just for the historical research process, but even for the existence of ambiguity and things I just don't know yet. Like I look at that, and rather than just thinking, oh no, there's so much ambiguity in this topic, I don't know much yet, whatever am I going to do? I actually take that as like, oh wow, there's so much more to explore now, basically like the base British explorer going into the savage lands of the African continent, for the first time and thinking, wow, we're going to explore all this stuff. Let's see what we can find. That's how I treat it. And as a result, I find stuff, I learn, and I make up, I make cool content. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of intellectual cowardice that pushes people. And of course, a lot of you watching, there's 72 of you watching. There's probably most of you. Sorry. I like offending my fans because that's why they watch me, because they want to be, live rebuked by me on air. But there's a lot of intellectual cowardice that pushes people into like the internet apologetic circles, because it's like, why would I go and, let me think of an issue. Like the papacy. I don't know. Papacy's good. Why would I, or, predestination's better. Predestination's a better idea. Why would I go and like read all of, these books covering, I don't know, primary sources like St. Augustine, St. Fulgentia, St. Prosper's works, St. Thomas's work, some of the histories of the Augustinian councils, some of the disputes between, in the De Auxiliis controversy between the Banyesians and the Molins, some of the more modern treatments of it. Like, why would I read through all of this stuff when I can just like go and watch like a 5-minute clip from Trent Horn about how Calvinism's evil and like reprobation's evil and stuff? Like, why? And of course, I do clips, and I think clips are clips. The good thing about clips, and the reason that I like making them, is I think that by having a concise explanation and knowing what you're getting into beforehand, it can help your reading. So like if I tell you a sort of quick description of St. Thomas's view on divine simplicity, 15, 20 minutes, which I actually just released a video last week. It was a clip that was 20 minutes talking about St. Thomas's view of divine simplicity. And then I go in and I read longer treatments of St. Thomas's view of divine simplicity, since I already kind of have a fundamental groundwork. Going to the more difficult is easier. But what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't watch all of this stuff that I do or Paul does or anybody else does. You shouldn't watch that as an end in itself. Like, I'm just going to figure out about predestination from YouTubers without going and studying. And the reason that people do this is it is a reason of cowardice. It's because they're afraid of having to spend, due to their insanely short attention spans, having to spend months on a single topic. Like, oh, months. I mean, I think I've probably spent at this point like 4 years straight. Probably 4 years straight just studying like De Deo Uno, unity of God. I've studied it a lot. That's because it's such a deep topic, and you just keep reading more and more and more. And I'm actually keep learning things.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, there's other stuff in theology that I need to read more about. Especially like issues of like the canonical aspects of sacramentology. Like that's something that I need to read more about. Issues of ecclesiology I need to read more about. But it's why would I want to spread myself so thin over all of those issues that I would just become a jack of all trade, masters of none. Like you just should
Yeah.
slowly study certain topics. And what apologetics does is it gives you like a sort of sophistic veneer of knowledge if you treat them as an end in itself. And it's really annoying to watch, and it actually damages people that I interact with every day. So that's why
100%.
I'm not being mean to you guys. That's just why, because I think it's actually damaging to you guys and your intellectual developments.
Yeah, it's completely true. That's why what's great with us is we copiously cite our sources and we tell people to read them. It annoys the hell out of me to see other videos online, especially in the apologetics sphere, but not even just in apologetics, honestly everywhere. Even just simple like historical battle documentary sites where they'll say like Kings and Generals honestly is the best example of this, because they're great. They do amazing war documentaries, really good production value. But then they'll say stuff like, in the year 1544, King Shabahana ordered his army to cross the Alps. And then it's like, okay, source, please, And they almost never cite the source, which is frustrating, because now, like, if I wanted to find it out, like, they're not helping at all. And then of course, going into the apologetic sites as well, they'll cite sources with relative frequency, but often not enough frequency, and they'll leave many big claims, just hanging. And even sometimes, just the source citation itself can be kind of inadequate, is such that it's not specific enough to like, well, where did you actually find this? What specific work of this author, for example? What edition, even? Because that can be a problem too. And so that's why I'm personally very autistic in my I'm just autistic, full stop. But now I'm very autistic with in my big streams where I do like lecture type stuff. I'll provide in the notes or the PowerPoint or what have you the exact sources I use and like exactly where you can read them. And that's what everyone needs to do. You need to actually become acquainted with them.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're trying to do, me and you, Wagner, is, as you said, we're not trying to be the end in itself. We're trying to be the conduit by which people will find these things and can actually learn for themselves and be actual learning rational agents and not just our sycophants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, here's